on Film, a program designed to keep you aware on everything that's happening in the world of faith and family entertainment. I am coming to you today from Capernaum Studios, where this week is the home of the Content 2022 Media Conference. If you don't know anything about that conference, you want to check it out. You'll see the URL right at the bottom there. And just look, it's too late to come to this year, but you certainly can come to it next year, and I would highly recommend it. I'm really excited about today's program because, as you know, that watch the program regularly, I recently moved to Texas. About a year ago, I moved to Texas. And of course, one of the first things that we needed to do was find a church. Very difficult because I used to go to a wonderful church in California. So we visited a few churches. And being a worship leader, I really was looking for that right church that did worship the way I was used to. No criticism on other types of worship. It was just, my own personal preference. But also being a media professional, I wanted to, a church that really understood media. Well, I found a church that has both of those things. The worship leader there is amazing, but of course the media director there just has the place rocking. And I'm excited because he's here with us today. Matt, welcome to Faith on Film, man. This is so exciting for me to have you on the program. But we need to learn all about you because, to be honest with you, I really just met you recently, and I don't think I really know a whole lot about you other than you're amazing at media, and but you're also a pastor, and I don't know if you've been a missionary. You seem to have been all kinds of things.
Yeah, I have. The Lord's really been good to me. He's allowed me to do a lot of things that I wanted to do. But yeah, I've lived overseas for a while, and then now I'm helping run our media department at our church.
Which again, and I probably can't say it enough, it's really pretty amazing media team.
I appreciate it.
I look for that wherever I go, and I'm not critical of worship. I just have a certain style that maybe I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
But media, I'm very critical. And you guys really impressed me there.
I appreciate that.
But so how did you even get started in media? Is that what you wanted to do since you were a kid? Because that's how it was with me, man. I was a kid and I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Maybe. As a kid, I loved watching movies. I loved watching TV. If there was a TV on, I was watching it always. I loved stories. That was my favorite.
Right.
In school, in high school, I started getting to watching film, and my parents didn't want me watching TV all the time, but I did anyways. So I love TV, I love film, and then actually when I went to college, my heart was actually to get into TV broadcasting in the church. And so I went to Sam Houston State University, which at the time had a radio television program. That was really good. It was the Dan Rather School of Communication, when that name still meant something. And so when I got there, the program kind of fell apart. The dean left. I was also getting some stuff in business. So I moved to a marketing and business degree, and then I moved overseas. But when I was overseas, media was still my heart. So photography is a passion of mine. So I helped the missionaries I worked with redo all their websites, redo all their marketing, produce videos. I had a camera I toted with me everywhere, both film and video, and I would constantly try to produce things for all these different programs. I helped kick off a TV program in Bolivia while I was there, and so I always felt like media was the way to reach the next generation. And as someone who really enjoyed media, I felt like the church should be at the forefront of producing some of the best media possible to reach not only people within the church to draw them closer to God, but also to reach those who have never heard about the message of Christ or never heard about what God could do for them or who God is, and be able to relate to a piece of media as an art form, and then hear the voice of the Lord in that and draw nearer to Him. So,
and I think people sometimes don't understand that the devil. I know here I'm going to talk about the devil. The devil uses media and has been very successful at turning the hearts and the minds of people through media.
Absolutely.
Through movies, through television, through music, through art. And we as a church have sometimes just kind of backed up away from that.
I totally agree with you. It's kind of a passion project of mine a little bit. It's this idea that the church world has, since the devil's been into media and movies and TV in particular, I feel like the church world's just thrown the baby out the bathwater.
Yep.
And we've said we don't want anything to do with media. And I don't feel like I don't think that was wise. And I don't know where the Lord's leading, but I think the Lord's directing and leading us to a place to where, He, just like in the Renaissance, when you had in the 15th, 14th centuries in in Italy, you had this renaissance of art, this renaissance of the humanities, but it was happening within the church, and it was happening through the church. And we had the Sistine Chapel and the Piete, and all these, the David statue, all these beautiful works of art that also helped bring culture everywhere, was also started within the church, and it was the church that was the patron of all that artwork. And whether or not you agree with all the artworks or not, or disagree with all the works, there was that the church was the center of it, and it helped minister to you. Walking into these cathedrals, and the stained glass would speak to the different stories in the Bible to a group of people who didn't understand. And so I think we can use the same principles, the same systems to teach God's word and who he is to the next generation of people through media.
Right.
Which I don't think is the devil's. I don't think the devil created film. I don't think he created photography. I think he's stolen it, but I don't think it belongs to him.
Yeah, well, he does come to steal and to kill and to destroy. So he's been able to steal this stuff so he can kill us and destroy us.
Something too that's, and being overseas, that I noticed because I was able to live in different spots. I heard a pastor, and his name's Robert Berenger, and he's been a missionary in Peru for 40 years, has a great church. And he always said that the grandmas in Africa are different than the grandmas in France, that are different than the grandmas that are in Peru, are different from the grandmas in the U.S., are different from the grandmas in Indonesia.
How so?
They're just different culturally, but the kids are all the same. Oh. And his point was that American culture and media has now permeated the world. Wow. I mean, it's our greatest export culturally is, and so you have the difference in, and I can attest to this, having lived in Africa, having lived in Peru and Bolivia, like American media is everywhere. So even though your grandparents and the parents kind of upheld these cultural traditions from their past, you have kids who've been consuming American media, the same TV shows I have, or the same TV shows my neighbors have. So culturally, the world is, these kids from Peru might culturally more relate to a kid from America than they would their own grandparents. Even though they might have a shared history and they might have a shared language, the power of American culture and influence has been so great on these nations. And then with the internet, you had essentially a flattening of the world to where now a kid in Africa can go on his phone, watch a YouTube video, the same one my kid is watching at home, and they're receiving the same information.
Yep.
So the world's flattened, and media is really the thing that's really, really changed.
Never thought of that. Never thought of that until right now. And I have to disclose, your father is a pastor.
Yes, he is.
In fact, he is the pastor of that church.
He is, yeah.
And that's the other thing that I was very impressed with. Is I just love, the church that I came to, the pastor was just a great speaker, great orator. And that's another thing that was going to make it difficult for me. Is like, man, I go to these churches and they just don't have the same flavor. And your dad did it. He captured me. So.
The Lord's really
I can't stop talking how wonderful this church is and how much I love it. By the way, it's called the Ark in Conroe.
A-R-K.
A-R-K in Conroe.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I do love pastors. So what I'm going to say is not something against pastors, but would you say that maybe that is going to be the biggest influence, or is the biggest influencer now in our culture? Is not so much the preaching in the church, but and this is tough because I know pastors are like, what are you saying?
It's an interesting concept. I think we approach it, I think, to me, and I'm a guy who loves preaching, and I've always grown up as a kid, and I love, I've received so much in a message, sitting with a pastor when I'm called to that pastor,
right?
And there's an anointing I think that can happen in those moments in preaching.
Yes.
That I think people can lose or forget about. That there's, when we submit to a pastor and authority, and he's speaking into our lives a God-ordained message to us, the people,
right,
that's specific. I feel like that is one of the most powerful things still in the world, in the church.
For us, Christians.
Yes. But I agree, but I think that media can really be, something that can really help people as well. I think it can speak to people in those moments and draw them nearer. I think God can use anything. I mean, if God used the donkey, he can surely use a video to speak to somebody. What we talk about in some of our strategy is that people go to church on a Sunday morning. You get 1 hour of church nowadays, and that's if you go every week. And the average American goes once every 5 weeks. So if you think about how little church people get,
Right.
we talk about as some of our strategy as a church is, how do I bring Sundays or church to you every single day? And so now with digital platforms like YouTube, and we have platforms as well like Facebook,
Right.
Instagram, we just got on TikTok. And so we feel like, okay, I came on church on Sunday, now I might get a clip from a message on Tuesday, here's a quote from a sermon, here's a Devo that's coming out on Friday. So a way for people to make church not just, because we're Sunday mornings limited to just those moments. Media has the ability to live in your life.
So, of course, we're not talking about replacing pastors.
No,
and
totally.
people need to understand it. We're
Yes.
not talking about replacing
No.
pastors. But you just said something right now that's interesting. That is, you're talking about almost taking that same pastor-type message, the preacher message,
yeah.
and putting it in media. But what about entertainment?
I think that's the next phase, because I think where, yes, I can hear a sermon clip and that can minister and that can message. I think entertainment is a really great phase to reach people, and I think it's a great phase to reach Christians in a different way. And I think something that we've discovered is that a lot of times people don't want to hear a preacher preaching at them on Facebook. What they want is they like a funny video. Like, I mean, even when I'm on YouTube, I'm not usually looking for preaching as much as I love it. I'm looking for something that's going to entertain me.
And that's the thing is we have been created, human beings, and
Totally.
we need entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And I've always thought of entertainment as the food for the soul.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to feed it.
Yeah.
The problem is that the food that's being given to us is extremely unhealthy food.
Yeah, you're right.
Because we as Christians have not been as diligent in creating the good, healthy food in entertainment, because we think entertainment, bad thing, bad. Ministry, good.
Yes.
Entertainment, bad.
We've missed the arts.
We've missed.
And I think, and that's sad for me, because I think the church, the arts and the Renaissance, to me, kind of going back to the Italian Renaissance, that's where it began. I mean, we have modern art because of the church. And so thinking through, how can the church begin to reach people outside of just the message or just Sunday mornings? And entertainment is definitely one of those ways. And I think there's, how do we create a medium that people can receive something from God? And that maybe it hasn't to be preaching at them, because there's a lot of Christian entertainment that preaches at people.
Again, because some people just feel like it has to preach. I have to preach.
I think it's, how do we bring the nuance of storytelling relating to a lost world, and then ministering to them the things of who God is, with maybe out shoving it in their face as much, but subtle. I mean, there's so many movies where, my favorite movies, I've cried tears. And it's not a Christian film by any means.
I can name you a few.
I'm not even relatable. Sometimes the character relates to me, sometimes it doesn't. And I've sat there and cried, and those moments in a film and a cinema, they stand out to me. And there's even been moments where I've changed the way I've thought about life, or the way that I have thought about a situation or a people group based off of film. I mean, film is such a powerful medium because it consumes all your senses all at once. And to me, it's the best way to tell stories.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jesus, when he told parables, there were stories. He wasn't preaching.
Yeah.
In fact, he didn't even mention, we always say, well, Jesus has to be mentioned in this thing. Well, Jesus didn't mention Jesus in the parable. It was just a story. It was a great story with a good moral message, or just a message.
But he would tell stories that are far more abstract than what we are producing nowadays.
And he even said something about not everybody's going to understand these stories.
He's like, if you have ears to hear, let them hear. And I think that's such a great point. You make a great point, Isaac, because I think we think we have to be preached. If Jesus isn't mentioned in the film, is it even a Christian film? And I would disagree with you, because I watched a film that was, to me, one of the best Christian films ever made, and it wasn't Christian.
Wait, what was it?
It was called A Hidden Life.
Okay.
And it was brilliant. I mean, it was about a man who was a Christian, but it wasn't a Christian film per se. And it was beautiful. And I cried multiple times in this movie, and I thought, wow, I'm thinking it really related to what God was speaking to me at that moment. And I think if we as Christian storytellers can think about telling stories and then really asking the Lord to help us, direct us, I think we can develop media and that can go to reach people emotionally in a space where they can relate to, where God can speak to their hearts. It doesn't have to be us so directly saying, but God can speak to the heart.
Well,
allow the Lord to minister.
Recently, I saw a post on Facebook where somebody mentioned the movie Les Mis.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and they said, what a wonderful Christian movie. Well, of course, the debate just started to rage on. That is not a Christian movie. And others were like, well, what makes a Christian movie? Well, and it was back and forth. But I had always actually seen that movie. Okay, so what is a Christian movie? I don't even know if there's a definition for a Christian movie.
Yeah.
But let's say a Christian movie is one that gives me the principles of God, the principles of Christ,
right,
the principles of Christian living. That one certainly did. It was all about forgiveness.
Yes, I love Les Mis.
Yeah, that one. And then, of course, there's the Book of Eli.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, the guy is trying to save and preserve the Bible.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, I heard that originally it wasn't, because it was the movie was actually written by two Muslims.
Oh wow.
And in the book, I'm not even sure what was supposed to be the book. It was just a book, maybe. But when Denzel, when they asked Denzel to be the lead character, he said, "I'll only do it if it's the Bible."
Wow.
And so it was. And
that's a great story.
Now, what makes it difficult for a Christian audience sometimes is the fact that there was language in it.
Yeah.
And people just can't handle language. But the message, and that's good, because if it's not for you as a Christian, but if it's for that guy that doesn't have a problem with that language, but somehow that touches him.
Yep. Some would argue that, to me, any movie that has a redemption story has an element of Christianity in it, because I think God wrote his story on all of our hearts. And there's an element, like everybody's favorite movies are the ones that have a sense of redemption, a character who was lost, who becomes found again. And where there was no hope, there is hope. That is the stories that relate to, I think the #1 movie on IMDb is The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh,
and
what a great movie.
It's a fantastic film.
Yes.
Is that a Christian movie? I don't know. Does it have all the story of who God is and what he's written in our hearts and our spirits? I would argue yes, because I think that, people say there's a God-sized hole in everybody, and I think that oftentimes the movies everybody loves the most are the ones that speak to that element. My question and challenge for the Christian world is, how can we develop content that speaks to that element as well without being so overbearing?
Right. Well, I think you are on the road to that. I know, and I had mentioned this to you before, that most churches, and I'm so glad you're at this conference today.
Very thankful to be here.
I know that most churches will send their youth pastor to a youth conference, and they'll send their worship pastor to a worship conference, their women's leader to a women's conference, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
But they never really think about the media people.
Yeah.
And I think it's because maybe they don't look at that as ministry. They look at the youth leader as that's ministry, the children's ministry. Media, that's a technical thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'm glad that your church said, go for it.
Yeah.
Go to that conference. But what is in your future? Let's say, what is in your plan to do? Because I know you do a lot of media for the church, right?
Yes, I do.
In fact, for your church, and now it's expanding to other churches. But do you have some other thoughts and plans and ideas of what you might want to do?
If I can go back to your conference note, how churches don't, they go youth pastor, conference worship pastors, all this stuff. I completely agree with you. And I think the church world in general should be looking at media as something valuable. One of the scripture that my department works on is from Exodus 35 and 36. And it talks about how Bezalel was called by God to create the tabernacle. So when God gives Moses the plan, here's what I want you to build, here's the Ark of the Covenant, here's the tabernacle, he actually calls Bezalel by name and anoints him with the Spirit of God for all handiwork and workmanship and wisdom and craft for the creating of the tabernacle for the Lord. And it's one of the first times in Scripture you see the Lord filled with the Spirit. He was filled with the Spirit to create the tabernacle. So it wasn't like God's like, hey, just make it. I'm good with it. He was like, I'm going to fill this guy with the Spirit. He's going to create this arts and handiworks and all the sewing and all the piece. So we see ourselves as the media department as a part of that. Like, we're here to help build the church. And God's given us a spirit. He's filled us with his Spirit in order to work all this stuff, in order to make something beautiful for the Lord according to how he wants it created. And I think, you see an artist who is anointed to do something for the Lord. in the very beginning. And I just think that speaks to my team and who we are in our heart. It's like the Lord's anointed people and filled them with the Spirit to minister through media. You know, it's something that's important to God. It's something that He's planned out, and I think it's something that He wants to minister to through people all throughout every single church. I wish more churches were here. We're one of the only churches here.
Really?
And
Yeah.
if I could say anything to any
Makes my point.
churches, you should be here. Churches should be out shopping shows. Churches should be shopping films and scripts, coming alongside our brothers and sisters who have a calling to produce film, to produce media, and saying, hey, as a church, how can we come and help you to minister? Because, you know, one story, one DVD, one short story, one film, one piece could minister to hundreds. It's evergreen. It could minister to people for a long time outside of just a Sunday morning building.
And what happens is that's why we tend to lose a lot of the great talent, people with great skill sets.
Yeah.
We lose them to the world because there's nothing for them here.
Can't make a living.
So it's like, they got to go out to you know, work on these movies.
The
and
church should be the
shows and
patron. The church
We
should-
really should. And I think that we may have seen that happen even in music years ago.
Yeah.
And you know, you kind of felt like, oh, if you're a singer, if you're a Christian singer, you shouldn't charge for a concert.
Yeah.
You know, and so eventually these people started to cross over.
Yeah.
There's that whole term, cross over, because they needed to make a living, you know.
Yeah.
And we wonder why then these guys go and sing, you know, secular music because we didn't support them.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing can potentially happen and is happening to media professionals. I have a brother who is a really good camera operator, jib operator. He does jib. Works in Hollywood, works for The Voice, works for a lot of, because that's, you know, I mean, I would love for him to be at a church somewhere, but you know, he's got to make a living, and most churches will not pay, you know, media people.
I think that's that, and I think
It is.
You know, as being a media person, I feel selfish in this, but I do feel like, you know, especially with where the world's going, and the internet and the flattening of things to where, you know, in order to shoot a film 20 years ago, I had to have film. You know, I'm running a light system. You know, the tech. You know, I'm having to edit on an Avid. You know, I'm literally splicing film together to make movies happen. Right?
Wow.
Nowadays, I can go on my phone.
Dude,
And,
I know.
and shoot something. I mean,
This thing is better than $100,000 cameras were 10 years ago.
The world has flattened to where, you know, it used to be there, all the media sat in Hollywood and everything had to go through all these distribution channels.
Yeah.
Cinema, movie theaters don't even matter that much anymore. Everything's going to streaming. It's, you know, how can the Christian world take advantage of this and the church and say, whoa, I can go buy a camera that's producing better quality and a lens than what anything we had 10 years ago for pennies on the dollar, and produce a film and produce a piece, a narrative, produce a short film, produce anything, a TV show. And you know, if the church world could, and maybe they are, and maybe I'm living in a small world, but just being at this conference and looking around, like, why am I the only church here? I'm going, my call is for that. It's like, let's get more and more churches producing more and more content, more and more media, because that's,
Yep. Well, yeah.
Sorry, it's my soapbox. I apologize.
That's perfect. We need to hear this, and maybe you'll need to go back, and if you have entrance to other churches, you need to share that gospel. That gospel. It is gospel. It's the good news.
It's the good news. Hey, there's an opportunity to make really great Christian entertainment and reach thousands, if not millions, of people around the world with the message of Christ.
And there's another area where I know I've been talking about it for about a year or so now, and I know I get the what is wrong with him, and that is the more horror. You know, when I mention the word horror, people just look at me like I'm crazy. You know, but of course I'm not talking about just sadistic, you know, slasher stuff, but I'm talking about scary stuff.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, but God is not the spirit of fear." No, I mean, you know, if we need to have the God scared into us, let's do it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of. I heard from a professor at a university, actually two different professors at two universities, Christian universities, that said that their students do not want to make Christian films.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because the few that have been made them, for the most part, have not been to their liking, to their quality.
Yeah.
So I said, well, what do they want to make? both of them said they all want to make horror films. And I'm like, what is that? How could that be? I don't even like horror
Yeah,
films. Why
same.
do they do this? But then I thought, okay, so that's why they leave. Once they've learned their craft at a Christian school, but then they leave and they go work for the world, because that's where they're going to get that. So what if we, harnessed that and said, okay, I'm going to let you make the kind of film that you want to make, but let me teach you how to make it in a redemptive way, how to make it that it has a message for God, and not be scared of it, And I've been telling people. The first time I did it, it was at a conference like this, and I said, I think some of you producers might want to consider doing Christian horror films. And it just came out of my mouth. It wasn't like I thought I was going to say. It just came out, But there was a guy who said, I'm so glad you said that, because I just made a Christian zombie movie. I was like, wow, okay.
Paul, I'm not a horror fan myself. It's not a genre that I ever go to. I would say this though. Paul said, the Mars Hill, "Hey, to the Jews, I'm a Jew." He said to the, he didn't say it's on Mars Hill, but to the Gentiles, I'm a Gentile. Die may win, but one. And I think, the Greeks, I'm a Greek. And he went to Mars Hill and said, hey, you have this unknown God. Let me tell you about him.
Yep.
And if a pastor did that nowadays, people would freak out.
I know.
And I think his approach was, let me meet people where you're at, and then I will let me meet you where you're at, and then let me minister Christ. And I think that's got to be our take on media.
I think so.
Where are you at? Okay, people are watching horror films. Why? I want to feel something. I want emotions, right? I like that feeling of,
I want to be scared.
Totally. Great. Let's make it, and let's make redemption. There was a movie, and I don't advocate it by any means, but Constantine. Do you remember that with Keanu Reeves?
Keanu Reeves, yes.
And he's like this in between heaven and hell. And I don't recommend that movie. I saw it, but he's killing all these demons, and how they portrayed them and everything like that. I remember walking away from that movie going, that was a Christian movie. I'm like, he's slaying demons. I'm like, but aren't we supposed to do that as Christians? Aren't we supposed to be going around and pretty much like, what did Jesus do? I mean, he was slaying demons. How do we make that relatable? How do you make that understandable for a community that has no idea about who God is? I think to whatever medium people are in, let's not just make pioneer films for Christians, because that's easy and supposedly kind of a clean society, but it's not. Let's make movies that are going to reach people where they're at.
Well, we have run out of time, unfortunately. If people want to write you and say you're nuts because of what you just said, where would they write? I don't know what to do.
Reach us at artchurch.com.
Okay.
We have a YouTube page, the Art Church as well. You can see a lot of our content that we have developed. We have a kids show, Herman and Rusty, that we shoot, and it's kind of like Seinfeld for kids.
All right.
For Christians. And then we have another show that's like a Blue's Clues for Christians and for kids, and it's a preschool show. So you can find us at artchurch.com, matt.clayton@theartchurch.com. Send me all of your criticism. I'd love to hear it. Please.
Yes,
I welcome it.
Absolutely. And thank you again for taking time. I know you want to get to probably some of the courses that are being given right now, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on. Folks, also don't forget, if you want to write us, you can write us at faithonfilmtv@gmail.com. That's faithonfilmtv@gmail.com, but only send me the good comment. No, not really. Send me anything you want to let me know, all right? Again, see you next week. Take care.